This is DawgNation Postgame, brought to you by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, Cercheros, Lassiter Tractor, the UGA Bookstore, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Now here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Hello, Dog Nation. Welcome into our Dog Nation postgame show. We're live on the field. It's Kroger Field, Commonwealth Stadium, where Georgia has survived 13-12. Not a thing of beauty at all, but Georgia does remain undefeated, keeping the Kentucky Wildcats out of the end zone, running out the clock, and getting out of here with you'll call it a hard-fought win, but obviously no style points earned tonight at all, and perhaps plenty of criticism from national media about whether or not Georgia deserves to be the number one team in the country. For the most part, none of that matters. Obviously, for Georgia, it's just simply about trying to figure out what went wrong that allowed this game in which Georgia was favored by about 24 points to be as close as it was, and what you do from here to fix that, as obviously a lot of Georgia fans will have plenty of eyebrows raised and have plenty of concern tonight about exactly what it was that we saw. We'll get your calls about that tonight. You want to click the link and be a part of the show, we'll give you a chance to do that. We'll also hear from folks live at Commonwealth Stadium in Kroger Field, including Jeff Sentell, Kaylee, Mansell, based on what Mark Stoops has to say, but obviously has become a staple for us here on this DawgNation postgame show. Also a chance to hear from Davin Bellamy. And Davin, you're a great former player. You played in games like this. You know the blood, sweat, and sometimes tears, I guess, that go into a week's worth of preparation. If you're Georgia in doing all of that, you walked out of here tonight with the victory. A lot of fans, though, aren't going to be happy with the nature of the performance and I guess the kind of the thorough beating that Georgia was able to give Kentucky tonight. It's going to be left lacking in the eyes of a lot of Georgia fans. So with your trained eye as someone who played for Kirby Smart here at Georgia, what did you like? What did you not like? What did you see here this evening?
Well, I think, Brandon, like you said, the fans are going to like the style points. But like I said in the pregame show, I fully know what it's like playing down there. Playing Kentucky, especially as the hottest team in town. I always say a joke and I always say, the Lakers are in town. But, when I say that, I mean, you're going to get everyone's best shot. And I can think about the time we played, Auburn in 2017, and we were the number one team in the country. And that crowd was rocking like they haven't been rocking all year. And they played the best game of their lives. Being the number one team, man, you got a target on your back. So especially playing Kentucky, which is already a tough game, I kind of expect them to have, their Super Bowl tonight.
Well, certainly Kentucky fans were treating it as their Super Bowl tonight. They were clearly enjoying all of that and obviously liking the fact they were keeping this game closer with the Georgia fans, or I should say with Georgia, than certainly many people would have expected. Let me give you two positives, though, Davin, and then I want to take some phone calls here there as well. Let me give you a couple of positives here. Here's positive number one. Obviously, it's a game in which Georgia plays pretty bad offensively. You look at the first half here, this is the worst yardage total in the first half during the Kirby Smart era. Georgia's never gained fewer yards and a half than it did tonight to begin the game. And yet in the second half, when you had to have some things happen, I thought a couple of guys stepped up. Primarily, I thought Dominic Lovett played some of his best football in a Georgia uniform in a night tonight in which Georgia just had to keep the football and not give it back to Kentucky. Even if you weren't scoring a lot of points, just had to sort of find a way to do that. I thought that Trevor Etienne also gave Georgia some hard yards there as well. So let me start with that as a positive here, Davin, and I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this and make it more than it was. I thought that Georgia played pretty bad tonight offensively, and I think that's one of those things you have to answer for. But when you had to have somebody step up, I thought that Dominic Lovett especially did a pretty good job of that. And Trevor Etienne, who, by the way, was fighting through injury, I thought he did some of that tonight too.
He definitely did. And, when you're playing this type game, I kind of call it, survive in advance. I'm not going to be so tough on them, tonight because, kind of like I said, those first 2 weeks, playing Clemson, who hasn't been Clemson since, Trevor Lawrence left, and then you play the team that we played, last week. This was our first test. You're on the road, you're playing an SEC team, and ever since I was at Georgia, Kentucky has been one of the most physical, hardest games I've ever played, ever since I started playing, football. But I just think, just having that Carson Beck guy at the helm, where he didn't get too flustered. I kind of thought in the first half he was too, conservative, but he didn't turn over the ball. And would it have been just a field goal game and a field possession game, I felt like he read the temperature of the room, perfect, and did what he needed to do in the second half of the game when he needed to do just a little more. So I definitely think it was a tough game, but when you're on the road, in the SEC, it's all about, survive, in advance. And I saw the true test of a national championship team because, they were down, but how did they react? At halftime, they were down, but they went in and they made the proper adjustments to win the game. And when you play in the SEC, you want the style points, for the fans, but at the end of the day, like Vince Lombardi says, just win, baby.
Yeah. Let's go to Dave in Raleigh. Dave, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame show. We're live here, Commonwealth Stadium. Got Davin Bellamy hanging out with us there as well. Dave, what did you think tonight about Georgia escaping? Not always pretty, but as Davin said, surviving and advancing. Dave, what were your thoughts on what you saw?
Resiliency, that's what I saw. I saw a Georgia team that went out there and resiliency won. Kirby Smart preaches it all the time, and I believe in Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is a very smart coach. He knows about resiliency. You saw him out there on the sideline getting after it, getting after the players. We have a lot of injuries right now. I think the bye week is coming at a very, very good spot right now for us before the Alabama game. But yeah. Kirby Smart knows what he's doing, and I believe in Kirby Smart. So that's what I see.
Dave, I think it's a great phone call, and I appreciate that. And, Davin, let me let you touch on both those things. First of all, the idea that Georgia, especially on your side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, tonight, Davin, this group did show a lot of resiliency. They were playing shorthanded. They were especially banged up along the defensive line. And yet, once again, they kept Kentucky out of the end zone. And for a team that still hasn't given up a touchdown yet this season, Georgia needed everything that Dogs defense could give them here tonight. So how about what Dave says there about the resiliency that Georgia showed?
You know what, man? Georgia, they just showed everything, I expected, especially from the defensive side of the ball. Something I mentioned, in the pregame show was, defense travels. You only have the speakers at practice when the offense is on the field. When the defense is on the field, it's quiet. So there's no difference between playing at home, and playing on the road, So I definitely think Georgia's defense, they kept us in the game with our red zone defense and only holding them, the field goals. And I kind of always like bringing up Carson Beck because you need that veteran presence. When a quarterback can read the temperature, of the room and see that my defense is only giving up 3, I just don't need to turn over the ball. And I got to hit the shots when they're there. And I just think that worked perfectly, just in sequence together.
Well, there's another point I want to make about the Georgia defense here in a moment, but let me kind of back off that here for a moment because, Davin, I think if you want to zero in on something that I do think is fair for Georgia fans to maybe bring up as a little bit of a concern today is I don't know we saw the best from Carson Beck. A late sequence in which Georgia had to give the ball back to Kentucky on the second down play. There's the mishandling of the snap. I thought Jared Wilson's snap on that was fine. I just don't think Beck, handled it well. Obviously, having a hard time getting anything going offensively. The only touchdown scored by Branson Robinson. So I think this is one of those things where, and you just heard from a Georgia fan, I think perhaps reflective of a lot of Georgia fans, it's good to win. It's good to do whatever you have to do to pull it out. And yet, if you're going to talk about what a lingering concern from this game is going to be, maybe over the course of the next couple of weeks before Georgia plays again, exactly what is going on with the Georgia offense, and in particular here, what is it with Carson Beck right now? Because while he has made some nice throws yet, this season, we still yet, I don't think, have seen him look like a guy who came into the season as one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy.
Right, no doubt. I definitely understand that. But the must thing I must say is, we look at that graphic right there. We only had 102 yards rushing. That's not Georgia. Usually one player, has that. So I definitely think, you showed me a great, quarterback. I also show you a balance, running game. And I definitely think for the majority part of the game, Kentucky was the most physical team on both sides of the ball. We mentioned last week, how we could not, how we gave up 100 yards versus, Tennessee State. And then you kind of see sort of the same thing kind of happening here of, they're not getting big runs, but 3 runs in a cloud of a 3-yard rush in a cloud of dust is a first down in the SEC. So I definitely think as we continue looking the season, in order for Carson Beck to have those numbers that we expect, our running game has to be where we expect it, to be. He's not a Caleb Williams type of quarterback. We work good off of play action and running the ball. And if we can't run the ball, then you're asking Carson Beck to win the game. And that's just not how this Georgia team is built. But one thing I do want to give him his credit was, it's 2 minutes and 36 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and you're trying to run out the clock. And it shows the trust that Coach Smart has in Carson Beck. If you have a freshman quarterback right there or a quarterback that you don't trust, you run the ball to keep the clock going and you put it all on your defense. Well, he elected to put the ball in his senior quarterback hands, and he threw a 14, 15-yard dart to get the ball rolling and to keep the clock moving. So even though he missed all the throws or he didn't have the game that we expected him to have, that fourth quarter at 2 minutes and 36-second mark showed me, the winner intangibles that he has, and he made the plays when he needed to.
I think that's really well said, and I do think that was arguably maybe the biggest play in the game when they're trying on this other end zone over here to get the ball back, to keep Georgia backed in. I believe it's a second down play where they step up, he steps up, he throws to Lovett, they complete it there, and that's the kind of clutch moment. I think you say this so perfectly that if you're not a veteran quarterback in that spot, you're simply not trusted to make the play, and perhaps if you're asked to do it, you're just not ready to do that yet. So in a game that didn't feature a lot of those moments, there's no doubt that was one of those moments here tonight.
No doubt. And I just want to give credit to, Vandergriff. I mean, he's a guy, what most people don't take into, consideration was with the portal now, you kind of get this NFL style where a quarterback knows your playbook, he knows your tendencies. This guy he sat in the backup role for 3-4 years. He served as a scout team QB. I thought he played with an edge tonight, and he knew everything that Georgia was going to do. One of the things, every time we played, Alabama, Coach Smart was always ready, and we always knew a little bit more because that's where he came from. Well, when you're playing with a quarterback who was literally there for 3 years and he's seen that defense every day at practice, they're usually, prepared. So I definitely think his performance in this game with his, familiarity with UGA defense made the score closer than we would have liked.
Let me also go back to a point I wanted to make about the Georgia defense a little earlier, which is I think up front right now, we did see Xavier McLeod play some tonight, and that's obviously a new addition to the Georgia team, and I think that Georgia's going to be happy to have him. We saw a lot of the same guys playing a lot of snaps here tonight. Jordan Hall downgraded to out before today's game. Mikael Williams was downgraded to out as we headed towards, game day Saturday. Warren Brinson, obviously, we knew he was going to be out. Some pretty significant absences for Georgia up front defensively led to a group that was just pretty shorthanded overall, and obviously it probably wasn't the best of that bunch playing up front, but some of that, I think, Davin, not to make excuses here, but some of that I think was because of the sheer number of snaps so many guys were being asked to play and the overall challenge of just being pretty winded and being out there trying to stop a Kentucky offense that was playing as physical as Kirby Smart was predicting that they would. 2 weeks to rest now. Davin, how important is that going to be for this group trying to get something closer to full health ahead of the game against Alabama in 2 weeks?
Well, Brandon, kind of like I said on the show before, to win the SEC, it's a little luck. Things have to go your way, and you have to stay healthy. That's why I'm so happy that we just got there, with the win, because you mentioned all the players that we were missing. But I definitely think Georgia has a bye week. And if it's the same Kirby Smart that I know, there isn't a bye week. Whatever your weakness was in the last game you played before that bye week, that's what, we're focusing on. So, of course, those guys are going to get the rest and try to get as healthy as possible. But the physicality and the line, scrimmage depth just wasn't there of what I'm used to seeing. So I definitely think Kirby is really going to get after those guys this week in order to stop the run, because if we're giving up 3 yards a pop, then we just won't be where we want to be at the end of the year.
Davin, how about a final thought from you on anything else from the game that you saw before we get ready to say goodbye to you tonight? Anything else jump out, either for the good or maybe what you want to see Georgia improve on beyond some of the topics we've already discussed?
I definitely have, two things. I definitely think we had way more penalties than a disciplined, Kirby Smart team.
Yeah.
Usually would have, and that just goes to show you the nerves on the road. The first SEC game, playing in a crazy environment. So a lot of guys, grew up tonight. But this game kind of reminded me of the Notre Dame game of our year. It was Jake Fromm, first year starting. We're playing in a tough environment. We're 2-0, and we just feel like if we can get this game, then we're rolling. Let's just steal this game and get out of here. And I definitely think that game kind of had a feel of, tonight. So I'm not super impressed on our running defense, but as far as like everyone's saying, just the resilience of the team and just letting the public know that it is so hard to win a game on the road in the SEC, especially when you're the #1 team. I mean, the whole town is there tonight. But I definitely think Georgia, they went in there with that battleman's mentality and never looked at the scoreboard and came out, with a victory. But I just think the penalties, that's not like us. And I definitely think that's something that Coach Smart is going to fix and probably something that we won't see in the future.
All right, so since you mentioned penalties, let me just say one more thing back to you, and I totally agree. At times tonight, Georgia was sort of uncharacteristic, especially in some cases on third down, keeping Missouri felt like Missouri 2022, keeping Kentucky drives alive on some third down stuff. But I got to come to Jalen Walker's defense. Once again, on this other end zone on the other side of the field over here, that roughing the passer call on him, Davin, and listen, you do this for a living, so this means a lot more to you than it even does to me. But what are we doing in football if a guy like Jalen Walker, who goes around essentially the belt area of a quarterback, wraps him up, and obviously we like Brock Vandergriff, we don't want to see him get hurt, but this is football. You wrap him up, right. You bring him to the ground. In that particular case, to have that called as a 15-yard rushing the passer, that's not just bad for a Georgia fan because it went against your team. Davin, if that's what we're going to try to define as illegal in this sport now, then we are redefining what the sport has been. I thought that was not just an awful call. It's one of the worst calls you're ever going to see. Right,
no doubt. I've had to alter my game so much with these new rules, and I definitely think it's off the refs, discretion. And that's why I say it's so hard playing in the SEC, because if that same play happens at Sanford Stadium, is that a call? If he doesn't make that call in Kentucky, that ref probably can't even make it back to his car. So I definitely had to adjust how I played, with that. It's just tough. You kind of don't want to tell your defensive ends to hold it back some. You always want to have your defensive ends firing, ready to go. But one thing I learned as I got, older is, sometimes the defensive end knows if he can get that sack, and only he knows, what I'm saying? And sometimes it takes a little discipline to know, because like I said, only the defensive end knows he's not going to get it. How fast you got to get there. Maybe just not finishing the tackle, because knowing that it's more of a risk than a reward. Yes, I get to lay on the hit on the quarterback, but it's not a sack. It's not a sack forced fumble. It's just a hit. But the risk is a 15-yard penalty. So I think as you get older, you start to learn when to, okay, I can make this sack. No, I can't. Let me hold up. So, but that's, to the refs' discretion. I definitely don't agree with the call.
Davin, great stuff as always. We'll look forward to catching up with you again on DawgNation Daily this week. More about where Georgia goes after getting to 3-0. Not always the prettiest game, though, today against Kentucky. It's a late night. Thanks for being here with us. Thanks for your thoughts on everything involving Georgia. Here's a part of our DawgNation postgame show. Great to have that discussion with you, and we'll look forward to also, as I said, doing it this week once again on DawgNation Daily as well.
Yes, sir. Just win, baby. Go Dogs.
I love it. Good stuff from Davin Bellamy. Now, if you're on hold, I want you to stay where you are. We're going to start rolling through all your phone calls, the good, the bad, everything in between from a Georgia win that was not quite what it was supposed to be, at least in the eyes of some. Tonight, on Kroger Field at Commonwealth Stadium. Also in our comment section, a lot being asked about the status of Tate Ratledge here right now. After we saw him leave the game, ESPN initially reporting it was a ankle knee injury. That was confirmed here in the stadium there too. Jeff Sentell was on the sidelines. He'll give us more of kind of a first-person perspective of what went down with Tate Ratledge here today. But prior to all of that, we got to pause for 60 seconds. We want to say hello to a couple of the sponsors who make all of this possible. It's literally 1 minute, and then we're right back to your phone calls and more inside information from what was seen on the sidelines. Stay with us here live, Commonwealth Stadium, as a part of our DawgNation Postgame show. We're back to it 60 seconds from right now.
When you've got to haul, when you've got to mow, when you've got to feed, whatever you've got to do, whatever you've got to do, you've got to get a John Deere. Whether you're working at home or on the farm, the team at Lassiter Tractor Company can help you find the right product for you. Find your local dealer at LassiterEQ.com.
Nothing makes a house feel more like a home than quality windows. So trust the professionals at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll equip your home with energy-efficient windows and doors just right for you. Schedule your free in-home, no-pressure consultation. Get product samples, installation options, and a free quote. Log on to PellaGA.com and visit our new Experience Center in Duluth. Tell them Brandon Adams sent you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best. Big games deserve big meals, so let Cercheros make it happen. It's friendly Tex-Mex, served fresh every day. Cercheros Catering can handle the crowd, so it's perfect for your tailgate or watch party. Order online, pickup, or delivery. Cercheros is Georgia grown with over 30 locations throughout the state, bringing you fresh Mex, bowls, burritos, tacos, and more, with over 25 fresh toppings, customizable, just the way you like it. So find a location near you at Cercheros.com. That's Cercheros.com.
DawgNation Postgame is sponsored by Cercheros, Lassiter Tractor, and Jittery Joe's Coffee.
Well, welcome back to our DawgNation Postgame show live on the field, Commonwealth Stadium. Kroger Field, Georgia has won 13-12. We've got Jeff Sentell standing by right here with us. He's going to give us information from the Georgia sideline from what he saw from down at that angle. We've also got your phone calls there as well. John in Henry County, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame show. John, how about them Dogs? It was a win, maybe not the prettiest game. What did you make of what you saw?
What's going on, BA? Long-time listener. Had to watch it at the fire
station. Thank you, John.
Tonight,
appreciate
unfortunately. So, yeah, we were stressing out, hoping we didn't get a call. But my take on it, Brock's been playing our ones on defense for past couple years. So, I mean, what better practice is that than, preparing for tonight's game? So he knew it was coming. I think we're fine. Penalties killed us, but I'm not too worried about it. Georgia's got that one game every year. And like I said, I'm not worried about it. I see a lot in the comments, people stressing, but we need that one to get out the way and keep on trucking, chopping wood, and getting to that natty this year.
John, before you go say goodbye, let me just say this. Thank you so much for being a first responder, being a fireman. That is brave work. It's courageous work. It's very important for those communities. It's really an honor to think that you would, while you're out there doing stuff like that, listen to DawgNation Daily and being a part of our stuff here at DawgNation. I really appreciate that, and I also really appreciate what you had to say about the Georgia Bulldogs tonight there as well.
Yes, thank you, B.A. Appreciate it.
Good stuff there from John in Henry County. How about that, the fact that Brock Vandergriff, because he's practiced against this Georgia defense, really looked better tonight, far better tonight than he did last week against South Carolina, for being honest, also far better than Carson Beck did in this game tonight, too. How much did familiarity with the Georgia defense perhaps help him in that regard?
Yeah, that's one thing we asked the Georgia players in the post-game Georgia locker room. We called it the Brock effect. Did that help Kentucky and Brock knowing what Georgia had, practicing against what Georgia had, or did that help Georgia knowing his tendencies and everything like that? Julian Humphrey had a pretty good answer for it. He kind of called it a stalemate. They knew what Brock can do. I tell you one thing, Vandergriff one thing you can say about him, he is a tough dude. I think he got knocked down like 30 times tonight. Ends up with like 14 out of 27 for 119 yards. But the big thing for me is I think Georgia tried to pressure him. Georgia tried to make him use his legs. I don't know about you, Brendan, but to me it seemed like maybe the one way to chisel away at this Georgia defense, think about Jalen Milroe, is with a running quarterback, a guy escaping and getting outside. Now, Vandergriff's nowhere near as fast as Jalen Milroe, don't get me wrong, but I think, one big takeaway, I thought Georgia brought in Dominic Lovett into the post-game locker room. And, Brandon, I don't know if you've seen the stats, 6 catches, 89 yards.
He was the hero tonight.
One big 35-yarder, Brandon. I'm going to tell you, it took some stones right down here to throw that ball. I mean,
you're right.
Wide open. He was wide open, but still you got to throw that ball. You got to make that ball. You got to complete that ball. And I think without Dominic Lovett tonight, we'd have a lot more sad faces on the postgame show.
You were 100% right. To me, Dominic Lovett was the hero in tonight's win for Georgia. Joseph in Buford, you're next up here on the DawgNation postgame show. What did you think? 13-12, a little bit of a nail-biter. How did you experience it, Joseph?
It was a nail-biter, B.A. and Jeff. We got to clean up those penalties going in against Alabama in 2 weeks, and we got to get that offensive line. We got to get better, and everything, because we don't, then there's gonna be some sad faces in 2 weeks. So it was uncharacteristic of the Dogs tonight, but we got an ugly win, and who can say 42 regular season wins in a row? Come on, you got to take the good with the bad. So thank y'all for what y'all do. And I'm a vet, so I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Man, that's awesome to hear, Joseph. Thank you for your service to our country. And, boy, thank you so much for listening to our shows. I think that's a really good call there, too. And, Jeff, I think you have to acknowledge what Joseph's saying there. This was not a good night for Georgia on the lines of scrimmage. On the defensive line of scrimmage, I'm frankly going to give a little bit of a free pass on that because I don't think we were close to seeing Georgia at full strength there. We did get Xavier McLeod back in the game some, but no Warren Brinson, no Mikael Williams to the extent that you still count him as a defensive lineman. Obviously, no Jordan Hall.
You lose Dawkins for about 2 quarters.
Yeah, well, he does come back in. Though.
Yeah, but I mean, we lost him. Georgia lost him maybe middle of the first quarter and second quarter, and comes back in the second half.
But on the offensive line side, this is a game because listen, it's worth pointing out. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's just some of this stuff's fairly predictable. We said all week. I've been warning on DawgNation Daily the entire time. This was not going to be a beautiful game. And I'm not trying to say, see, I told you so. What I'm saying is we've got going on like 10 years worth of experience with Kirby Smart that. Some of this stuff is sort of, or 9 years, I guess. Some of this stuff is just sort of fairly repetitive. Georgia does not play well in these spots frequently when they have a chance to have extra rest coming the following week. So if Georgia had any chance to build margin tonight, I thought it was going to be with the offensive line, and I thought it was going to be with the running game. But that didn't really happen tonight. Now, the Tate Ratledge injury occurs, but listen, Georgia's got more guard depth than anybody in America because of the fact you're able to bring Micah Morse in the game right there. I think there is definitely something a little bit – eyebrow-raising may be too strong of a word here, but I think there's definitely something that causes you to take a little bit of a pause. But the fact that this Georgia offensive line tonight did not win the battle, I would say, thoroughly against Kentucky. Deion Walker had a tremendous game, especially early. He's a very good player, but he was really getting off the edge with some pass rush early, very much hurrying Carson Beck on some throws. Not a great night tonight for Georgia up front offensively. I think that's fair to say.
Very fair to say. I think, Brandon, first thing, let's hit the keynote first. Tate Ratledge was in a walking boot afterward. Looks to me like it is an ankle, a foot injury. We know Tate has had some history with foot injuries. I remember one last year against Tennessee besides the one against Clemson in his career. And, Brent, I'm just going to be honest. Something is amiss with Georgia offensively, whether it is, and that sounds like understatement, but I want to see more confidence from Carson Beck. Brock Vandergriff has the ball trying to mount that last charge for Kentucky, and Carson is literally – not projecting that aura of confidence you want to see. I think he's basically like squatting, barely can watch the field. But then, Brandon, Georgia can't run the ball tonight. It was a stalemate at best, if you want to say that. I don't even know if it's a stalemate. And then you watch different pieces, Brandon. I watched Ernest Green III at times. I think he's probably the second best lineman on Georgia's line. Last week he got beat by speed rushes against Tennessee Tech. And then tonight, I don't know if you noticed it, Brandon, but there was coming in and out. I don't know if it was an injury, but he came in and out on a couple series, including the touchdown drive. Did you see that Georgia had Monroe Freeling in there at left tackle when Branson Robinson scores the ball right?
But they've also been rotating Freeling some on both tackle spots anyway. So, I mean, and you're on the field, so you may have a better perspective on this than I do. I couldn't tell if that was a coach's decision or if that's just the natural rotation they've sort of been using.
Yeah, so let me follow up on that point. The one thing that makes it intriguing to me is then when Georgia has the ball and they've got a grind clock in the final minute and a half, Ernest Green III is back out there at left tackle. Makes me wonder what's going on right there. And again, you have ETN leave, ETN come back. Again, Brandon, I think we've seen right here without against a good team that can match Georgia or at least stalemate Georgia up front physically. Carson Beck without a run game, Brandon. I'm going to say this, and this is in the simplest terms I can. He's been in college football for 5 years. He's a Heisman candidate. He's got weapons galore. Something is not right with him having command and confidence in this offense right now.
Yeah, I think you've got to admit that. And listen, I think a lot of the Georgia fans, I believe, tonight are striking the right balance of, boy, this wasn't pretty. Maybe didn't expect it to be. At least we won. Thank goodness, try to play better in a couple of weeks. And so I think that you can look at a few things and say, hey, love it, played great. Trevor Etienne, you got some nice moments from Etienne tonight, I think, too. Defense, I believe it'll be better when the guys up front are a little healthier. But the thing about Carson Beck, I don't believe you're being overly negative or overly pessimistic if you sort of just admit the truth. Through 3 games, Carson Beck has not had a great season thus far. And for a guy that's supposed to be the kind of favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, a guy who's been talked about as a possible number 1 overall draft pick, Carson Beck's fingerprints weren't put on this game tonight at all. And for a team that doesn't have Brock Bowers anymore, for a team that on the offensive side that for a good while was sort of standing around waiting to see if someone was going to make a play, I'm sorry. Carson Beck needs to be this team's Brock Bowers. The way that Bowers put this team on his shoulder last year for, like, say, the Auburn game, that's got to be Beck somehow, some way this year. And on the issue with the snap down here on the second down play that kind of turned into a turnover on downs, that wasn't a bad snap. I'm not putting that on Jared Wilson at all. I'm putting that on Beck, and I'm not trying to, drag him through the mud because obviously we expect that he's going to play better. But through 3 games, he has not played not only at a Heisman Trophy level, he really hasn't played at kind of a national championship level for Georgia through 3 games. I just think that's fair.
I think it's fair to say he hasn't played like Carson Beck did last year even maybe it's a simple fact of, Brendan, we expect these players to progress. We expect them to get better. And maybe it's growing pains with he doesn't have Ladd's security blanket and not have Brock Bowers' security blanket. One thing I know we have Kirby Smart coming, so I'll just tease this. Brandon, his post-game comments were not fire and brimstone. Maybe this is him backing his team and backing his boys on another hard-fought win, an SEC win when they didn't have their best stuff, but he was very positive. He was very, very upbeat and very proud of the effort tonight.
Why don't we do this then? Since you mentioned that, let me do this real quick. First of all, our friends at the UGA bookstore, we love them. Obviously, they keep us well-stocked with apparel. I always get people bragging on me all the time for the UGA clothes that I'm wearing. And I tell people, literally, so much of what I wear comes from the UGA bookstore. So if you're getting ready for a trip to Tuscaloosa and a fun fall in Athens, obviously the UGA bookstore, the place to go for all of that. You can also do your shopping experience online, UGAbookstore.com. In addition to great apparel that you can get, you can also have great autograph experiences before every game. Now, it's a few weeks before we're back in Sanford Stadium again, but Buck Bellew, Mohamed Massaquoi, I know Trayvon Walker's going to roll through there at some point in time this year. I believe Stetson Bennett's coming in there too. Great list of autographed guests on their way to the UGA bookstore. So please, we're there for every DawgNation postgame show. Come by and see us. We'd love to have you there for that. Jeff mentions Kirby Smart, what he had to say. We're going to try to hear some of Kirby Smart on that here in just a little bit. But since we're also having the discussion about Carson Beck and what we did and didn't see from him, how about what Beck saw himself here tonight? Let's hear a couple of minutes of that. We'll have more from Jeff Sentell. Kaylee Mansell is going to give us a first-person perspective on what Mark Stoops had to say. But for now, Carson Beck, does he feel what we feel like we're noticing about a lack of rhythm for him offensively right now? Let's hear him in his own words here right now as a part of our DawgNation postgame show.
Hey Carson, we know it's never easy to win on the road in the SEC, but can you tell me what adjustments did you guys have to make in order to pull off a win?
Yeah, no, like you said, it's not easy, especially on the road. I think you go back and you look at 2 first road SEC games the past 2 years. Missouri 2022, dogfight. Last year, Auburn, dogfight. This year, dogfight. We knew that it was going to be a dogfight coming in. We knew that it was going to have to be blow by blow. Obviously, there's things I think we can fix. Try to watch the film and try to improve on those. But, I mean, they're a physical team, and there's a lot of respect there, but we were able to pull it out.
What can you say about your defense? They still have not given up a touchdown. It was a defensive battle out there tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's unbelievable, especially with guys down. You know, I mean, you look at our D-line, there's freshmen stepping up. You got freshmen all over the field. I mean, guys getting put in places and fighting through injuries and all of the above. But no, super proud of them and the way they're able to play tonight.
What did it mean for you to see Brock Vandergriff, one of your best friends out there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously awesome for him. Proud of him. He had a pretty good game tonight. Haven't seen him in forever. Actually, didn't get to talk to him. Mad I didn't get to see him after the game, but no, obviously proud of him and best of luck to him in the future.
A lot of us were curious. What was that halftime conversation like with Coach Smart and the players, and just what was said to create the second half?
Yeah, kind of what I just said earlier, that we knew that it was going to be a physical battle, and you know, they were playing pissed off, they were playing angry, and we knew that we were going to have to come in here and try to be physical, and we were able to do that in the second half and squeak it out. So a win is a win, and obviously I'm really proud of the guys.
How's your shoulder feeling? It looked like maybe it was a little bit of a tough hit there, and of course you have the bye week coming up. How big is that?
Yeah, thankfully we have a bye week, so we'll see. Yeah, no, I'll be fine, but no, we'll see.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so much, Carson.
What is it about?
So a little bit of an interesting thing there. You heard Allison Mastrangelo from WSB Channel 2 asking Carson Beck about a shoulder. He says, I'll be fine. She obviously references the bye week. He doesn't really make much about that. But did you see anything tonight that made it seem like that Carson Beck might be dealing with a shoulder injury?
The only thing I saw was that last play, Brennan, when they're trying to, they're in that kill clock phase right before that delay of game and right before that punt. It was like an RPO. He calls his own number, swinging around. He got dinged pretty hard, got up real slow a little bit. That was the only time I really saw anything Carson physically.
Now, speaking of shoulders, you also had the situation with Nate Frazier tonight where Frazier doesn't play at all in the first half. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this because I don't know how much the Georgia fans by and large necessarily care about this. But Frazier left the Tennessee Tech with injury last week. We were told after the game that he was fine, could have gone back in. Frazier's name never appeared on the availability report at all here this week. This is obviously the first week of the now SEC-mandated availability report in a league game. Frazier's name doesn't appear at all on that. And then in the first half, he doesn't play at all, and it's a half which Georgia's not really getting anything going. And the spark, if he was capable of providing it, that Frazier gave during the Clemson game, you would presume you might want that tonight here against Kentucky. We do see him play in the second half here. Was not spectacular. Probably made a bad decision on a cut back to the left down near the goal line. But nonetheless, interesting to see that Frazier doesn't play at all in the first half, in a half when Georgia had fewer yards offensively than it's ever had in the Kirby Smart era. But that button doesn't get pushed after Frazier's name does not appear on the availability report. That's, I think, at least a little bit curious.
Well, especially when ETN goes out and he has – I remember seeing him jogging off the field right by me, Brennan, and I was like, is it a concussion? It turns out it was a shoulder because he was moving really quickly. And, again, that's the part where Frazier could have put his imprint on a game. I mean, Brandon, when the struggles Georgia's having right there and ETN's off the field and Frazier's not in the ball game, you really lose a lot of your heavy hitters on offensively trying to make a play, especially, Brandon, in a night when Georgia was trying to run the football, establish itself offensively there.
Now, also speaking of injuries, too, we were also told by the TV broadcast that Trevor Etienne was dealing with a shoulder injury going to the half. He was actually listed as questionable to return, according to what the ABC, I guess, broadcast reported there. But he does play, and I totally agree with you earlier. I think that Dominic Lovett was my player of the game. I hope that's what the audience also votes for, because I thought Lovett was the player of the game tonight. But I also thought that, especially considering the fact that he was playing through pain, I thought Trevor Etienne really provided something for Georgia, pretty well there too.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you have really, Brennan, you look at all the points Georgia had, you have to think about Peyton Woodring being very consistent, hasn't missed a field goal at all. But I think a lot of those points were set up by short fields. You remember that great play Raylan Wilson made that Damon Wilson jumped on? Georgia can't get a lot of points early in that game. They have to settle for a field goal. And I mean, I want to stress here, the overall feeling, Brandon, is I saw, maybe it was after the Jalen Walker call. I'm sure you've talked about that already on the program, Brandon. But like after the Jalen Walker call, Georgia played perturbed on defense. Nasty, mean. They wanted to batter Brock Vandergriff within the confines of the whistle and affect the quarterback. And I haven't seen that type of defensive play from Georgia yet this year, just getting after it, laying licks on people. Another thing, Brandon, sticks in my mind is Julian Humphrey after the game was stressing to the media how physical the game was. He actually opens up his mouth and shows a cracked veneer.
Wow.
And he's like, I'm going to tell you how physical this is. And he points to his tooth, and he's got a cracked veneer right there. And he's like, yeah, this happened in the first half, and I'm going to have to come back. And I came back in the game because remember, Brandon, then the situation about Daniel Harris exclusively to me sounded like it was Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey's ball game tonight.
Yeah, and by the way, it did not have the word veneer to be used on more than one occasion tonight's show. Now, Jeff mentioned Raylan Wilson. Obviously, Dominic Lovett did some big things for Georgia, but because of some of the plays that Raylan was able to make, including the one that Jeff just described, Raylan Wilson will actually get to be our DawgNation postgame show player of the game, courtesy of our friends at ServPro. Congratulations to Raylan Wilson, who was kind of all over the place for UGA here on the defensive side here tonight, and he'll walk away with player of the game honors for his efforts there. Of course, we appreciate ServPro making all of that happen. And listen, we know what it's like to have a mess to clean up, fire, water damage, things like that. For a good long time tonight, Georgia also had a pretty big mess to clean up here on the field there as well. And so if you've got that same situation in your home or your rental property or your commercial property where your business is located, if you have any of those kind of issues, our friends at ServPro, the restoration specialists, if it's been damaged by fire or water intrusion, pipe breaks, rain, the roof caves in or something crazy like that, the restoration specialists at ServPro can kind of get it back together, put back up, clean back up like it never even happened. That is what ServPro is all about. So find them online. It's servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com for a lot more on that. If you want to join us by phone, got a chance to do that. Now, I say phone. It's really a Zoom call, but just click the link, DawgNation.com, Facebook, YouTube. We'll get you on and get you a part of the show. We'll also hear from Kaylee Mansell coming up in just a little bit, too. Let me do a couple of other things here before we get there. First of all, Branson Robinson gets the game's only touchdown. 2 consecutive weeks for him getting a touchdown. That's both important for Georgia tonight because goodness knows they needed those points, but also another step for him in the comeback. Didn't see a lot of Branson tonight. Probably could have used a fully healthy sort of thunder between the tackle style back. Branson not quite, by my eyes, able to do that as of yet. By the end of the season, hopefully so. But he did find the end zone again. That's a pretty good thing.
Here's what I think through 3 games, Brandon, and folks weigh in. I think one thing that Branson has, I don't know if he has this explosive yet to get outside and hit the edges, but he has developed into, because Brandon, he got those carries, those touches by the goal line when Georgia wanted to hammer that thing in. He is your goal line short yardage, stick it in there type back that maybe we saw a couple years ago with a guy like Zamir White and then Kendall Milton last year. I mean, you're really seeing, again, it's the great story about Branson Robinson coming together. One thing about your ServPro player of the game, I spoke to Raylan Wilson after the game, Brandon, and he was like, I said, man, what's the feeling like? Is this thankful? Is it relief? Is it escape, survive? And he chose thankful. He said, getting out of this thing with a win, he said, listen, man, we got a lot to fix. We got a lot to clean up, and we'll have the ability to do that over the bye week. You remember when Kirby Smart tells his players, we got to go to the doctor?
Yeah.
That's going to be a long doctor visit this week.
So let me piggyback on the point you just made there about Raylan Wilson saying that he's thankful. I am too. Now, listen, I do this for a living. If Georgia loses, I've still got to come on the show and talk about it. And, we live in an age now where a loss is not debilitating, not to your chance of winning the national championship. We may see a situation where Georgia's almost guaranteed to lose a game before the season's done. Maybe everyone will lose a game before the season's done. But I can tell you this, and I don't mind being honest. I didn't want Georgia to lose tonight. Man, did I not want Georgia to lose. It's 40-whatever games, one of our callers said, what the total number of regular season wins in a row that Georgia's been able to have. I'm standing up in the press box at the end there just because, A, I'm trying to get down to the field as soon as the show's done, the game is done. But at the same time, one of these days it's going to end. We just know this, right? We're all smart enough to know that one of these days Georgia's going to lose a game again, and it's going to stink when it happens. I did not want it to be tonight. I'm just here to tell you, I did not want it to be tonight.
But you know what? Dominic Lovett and that Georgia defense said, Brandon, they said not tonight. They said not tonight. I'm going to tell you one thing again, Brandon, what it was like down there. I started looking around, and those Kentucky fans were like staring at those goalposts like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and he starts salivating in Wile E. Coyote or something like that. we were looking around and they're like, oh my gosh, not only might this all go down, but they might take their goalposts tonight by knocking off number 1 Georgia. And then it was every man for themselves down there on the sideline.
So you saw the numbers: 42 consecutive regular season wins, 28 straight wins in SEC play. How about 16 consecutive wins in hostile environments? That is the story, and Georgia continues that streak. Now, to turn it into 43, it's a doozy. 43 will be a doozy now, but we got 2 weeks to get ready for that. Let me do one more thing for you, Jeff, and then after that, we are going to hear from Georgia coach Kirby Smart. That comes up here in just a couple of minutes. I said this to Davin Bellamy. I want to repeat it again here right now. We can talk until we're blue in the face about a whole bunch of stuff that Georgia needs to be better at. I probably zero in on Carson Beck as a guy that I want to see more from, and that's a conversation that's worth having. I really, truly believe that it is. But the thing that can't be glossed over tonight, in a night that was far from perfect for the Georgia defense, it is now 3 games in a row this team did not allow a touchdown. They gave up, 4 field goals, and 2 of them were like long. It's
school record, I think, were one of those.
Yes, one of them was a school record. This is the first time since 1977 that Kentucky's had a kicker make 2 field goals of 50 or more yards in the same game. So that kicker was kicking like, an All-American tonight. But Georgia does not give up a touchdown. If they had, Georgia probably would have lost tonight.
You know, one thing, I didn't even know the stat, Brandon. This may marvel you, but somehow Bob Stoops and his staff had cracked all the numbers and crunched all the numbers.
Mark Stoops, yeah.
Yeah, excuse me, Mark Stoops. I don't want to make him the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners and many, many moons ago. They crunched the numbers, and they found out that over the past series of years, Brandon, Georgia has only allowed like 29 completions in the red zone, period.
Yeah.
And he was just talking.
What's funny is that Kentucky was were they even in the red zone tonight?
No, not really. But he was like, you just can't move the ball on them. It's so stingy to do that against Georgia. And you think about it, Brandon, I even go back to, you were talking about those field goals. What is that? Georgia's given up 18 points now through 3 games. Those are all field goals. And what was the score of the Orange Bowl, man? Was that
only 3 points allowed? Only 3 points allowed there as well.
4 consecutive football games, and some of those are against.
And that's not empty calories. That mattered. As I said before, Jeff, if Georgia gives up a touchdown tonight, I believe they probably lose.
Yeah, and you got Florida State in that mix. You got Clemson in that mix. You got Kentucky in that mix. Some really good football teams and whatever. The one thing about that streak, you're right. It is going to end. It's the law of averages. But, you keep coming back to, I think the defense did, and I know fans are going to look at this. Defense fine, offense, really go see the doctor. But no matter what ills Georgia has with that offense, with that staff, with those player assets, on an off night, you should get more than 13 points. I mean, this is an offense that averaged 40 points per game last year. Should be better this year. And when you only scratch around and you have to get 2 field goals and some Dominic Lovett brilliance to get to that, 13 points is not what this offense is capable of.
So let me correct myself on one thing. Kentucky does make one trip to the red zone tonight. They get as far as the UGA 14-yard line before kicking one of their 4 field goals here tonight. Jeff Sentell, great stuff down the sideline. We'll look forward to seeing some beautiful photographs from you. And Jeff's also been our driver here this weekend, too, back and forth from the great state of Georgia. So we'll look forward to all going back together there tomorrow. One of our passengers is also Kaylee Mansell. We'll get a chance to hear from Kaylee here in a moment. She was with Mark Stoops after the game. What did he have to say as well about the Georgia win tonight? We'll hear from him from the perspective of Kaylee Mansell and her thoughts about the game there as well. But the voice that matters even more than my own is that of Georgia coach Kirby Smart. His thoughts, as Jeff said, kind of taking the page that he often does. He's not fire and brimstone after these closer than they're supposed to be games. Sometimes he's a little more, can I say demure? Kirby at times a little bit more demure in some of these press conferences and situations like that. Tonight, maybe an example of that there as well from a couple of minutes ago. This is Kirby Smart here in our DawgNation Postgame show live from Kroger Field.
Coach Stoops and the atmosphere and the culture he's created here, I tried to tell everybody all week, but nobody would listen to me. I know what this team's made out of. I know how tough he coaches. I know several of his coaches on the staff. I've known them for a long time. I have tremendous respect, and when they get disrespected like they did last week and they listen to it for a week, they come out ready to play. And I think our kids listened to that. I think they understood it, but I also think it's a tough environment to play in. I'm so proud of the resiliency our kids showed. They never flinched. We thought this would be a blow-by-blow game, and we talked all week about blow-by-blow, deliver more blows than them. And we said the first chop of the tree doesn't chop the tree down. It takes sometimes 272 axe chops, and it took every single one tonight to get the job done. What I will say is I'm proud of our team. I'm proud of our leadership. I honestly believe we won this game with culture, and the culture of our team never panicked. I saw more leadership tonight than I've seen all season, and you guys have asked me 1,000 questions about this team this, what about this team this. I don't know much about this team, but I found out more tonight than I've known up to this point, and that makes me extremely proud of how they responded and how they handled some difficult situations.
Kirby, you always say it's very hard to win in the SEC. How important was it for your team to face this adversity early in the season and overcome it?
Well, I'd rather not face it. I mean, I didn't prefer it to be that way, but I also told people all week, I knew it. I mean, we played on the road at Missouri 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I guess, 3 years ago, I don't know when it was, and then we played on the road at Auburn. I get it. When you go on the road for the first time in the SEC at night and you keep a team in the game, you don't start fast. It's going to be a challenge, and we responded to the challenge. And the best thing is we got a lot of things we can work on now.
I think Kirby Smart's exactly right. In fact, we talked about that a lot on DawgNation Daily this week. Sometimes these things are just sort of fairly easy to predict. That college football last week, like Kentucky couldn't play with anybody, maybe just sort of expecting them to play better. Georgia obviously conquering the world. Sometimes that's not always the way it works out. And tonight it was one of those examples. We're live here at Commonwealth Stadium. Georgia does get the win. 13-12 is the final. We'll hear from Kaylee Mansell, as you can see in a moment. We've also got Matt standing by as well. Matt, how about them Dogs? Georgia somehow, some way got it done. What did you think about it?
Hey, BA, you guys happy here? I want to make sure you guys have me.
I got you. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay.
Sure do.
Good. So, okay, I can see you guys. You can't see me. Okay. So, BA, I wanted to have a bourbon drink with you tonight. I don't feel like tonight merits that. I think I speak for a lot of us when I feel like I'm a little disappointed in the manner in which we won. Yeah. So I want to try and not harp too much on Bobo, but the point is that I feel like we don't get our offense going with him unless we get the run game going first. He likes to attack the open zones, and if we can't get the run game going first, then it gets us bottled up. And that's what I felt like tonight. I felt like Kentucky kind of read our playbook, so to speak, and I was really, really frustrated with the way our offense got going. And I've got so many people from here in Texas saying, "Oh, what about Carson Beck, man? Come on, he's supposed to be like, your number one pick, blah, blah, blah." I felt our offense was very vanilla. I felt like we didn't attack enough with the run game. We could have established our running game going downhill, and that opens up the zones from Bobo to get the guys open in their downfield and whatnot. And we don't attack downfield enough. It was frustrating for me, but again, I get it. A win's a win, but at the same time, we're the number one team in the country. A 1-point win over a Kentucky team that just lost by 25 points to South Carolina at home. I don't know. So I guess I'm here. Like I said, I'm happy to talk to y'all, but I guess assuage my anger, BA.
Well, Matt Rukavina, first of all, it's always great to hear from you. A really good call from you, as always. And if we're going to make this the blame game, and sometimes that's just what a post-game show conversation is, Kaylee, I'm going to tell you that if I can only point the finger of blame at one place about why this wasn't, necessarily a thing of beauty for Georgia tonight, I do put it more on Carson than I do Mike Bobo. This wasn't, for me, a blame Bobo game, and I know there's going to be some chatter about that, but that's just not what I thought this was here tonight. Now, I'm also not going to get, really over the top in my criticism of Carson either, because I honestly believe he'll eventually play better, but I think tonight there were moments that Beck could have had more. Now, Matt's 100% right. The running game did not get fully unlocked for UGA, but I think we live in a day and age now where successfully passing the ball opens up more for the run. And tonight, a couple of opportunities just sort of got missed. And it just wasn't sharp. It just wasn't crisp. It was sort of a full game's worth of what we saw in the first half against Clemson. So if we're going to play the blame game here, and if I can only point the finger in one direction as why it wasn't better offensively, for me it's more Beck than Bobo.
Yeah, I agree. There were flashes of good, but there were also flashes of bad, and that might work against some opponents, but in the SEC, especially on the road, you can't have the good with the bad. I think for me, there were certain things that were inside of Carson's control. And at the beginning of the season, we thought it was going to have to be Carson that elevated everyone else around him, especially in the wide receiver core and the running back room. But tonight, it was the players around him that had to elevate Carson Beck and save him from what could have been a disastrous ending. So good thing we're going into the bye week. A lot of things are going to have to change, but it's just a shame because I don't feel like we've seen the best of him yet. And we don't have to at the beginning of the season, but we certainly need to see more than what we saw tonight.
Let's check out Big D and Evans. Big D, you're on the DawgNation Postgame show. What are your thoughts here on a Georgia 13-12 win tonight over Kentucky? Big D, go ahead.
Well, this is Stick D's and Rowan D's here. And
oh, Stick D's. Yeah, our buddy Stick D's from the YouTube comment section. Stick D's, glad to have you here.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
My biggest observation was that they had a lot of trouble, like tackling. They would make contact with a player at the line of scrimmage, and then they would let them go another 3 to 5 yards without tackling properly. And then, that was the biggest mistake, I think, on the defensive side. What do you think, Rowan?
Just they weren't on defense. They were letting them get away.
Yeah, same thing, huh?
They weren't, tackling them fast enough.
Rowan, it's good to have you staying up late with us here tonight. I'm glad your daddy let you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff from our buddy Stick D's and Rowan. Yeah, good stuff from them here tonight, and obviously talking about that Georgia defense. And clearly, Kaylee, that's a group right now kind of fighting through some injury and fighting through. But as I told Jeff Sentell a moment ago, ultimately, and I think our first caller tonight used the word resiliency. I think that we did see a resilient performance from Georgia on defense.
I mean, it's easy to take away the negatives from this game, but look at the positives. Still no touchdowns given up by this Georgia defense. Keep in mind, Julian Humphrey and Dalen Everett played almost every single snap at that cornerback position. The D-line is battling health issues. This bye week that we really haven't had since, 2019? It could not come at the more perfect time because they're banged up right now, but they worked with the cards that they were dealt to the best of their ability, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we had a good comment coming from Lee Harmon who says every time they have an outing like this, they respond strong. Y'all, it is true. This is one of the reasons why, I'm the guy that said that Georgia would beat Clemson by 30-something, and they did, and would struggle tonight, and they did. A lot of this stuff, now, college football is not always easy to predict, but some of these Georgia games in this Kirby Smart era are actually fairly easy to predict. That it would shock me if we don't get a much better effort and performance, maybe the better word, much better performance from Georgia against Alabama. Now, will they win? It's going to be a tough game. Obviously, Alabama was very impressive today against Wisconsin, albeit with an injured quarterback on the Badgers side of things. But as the commenter says, that this is sort of the spot where Georgia frequently doesn't play very well. Thankfully, we've gotten very used to playing really well when it matters most. And honestly, nothing about here tonight probably changed my overall feeling about Georgia. I'm really glad they didn't lose. It got a little tighter, a little closer than I expected it to. But honestly, I still have the same expectations for Georgia, playing well at Alabama, playing well at Texas, and making a big run towards another national championship. The overall performance tonight, while it was pretty scary at times, doesn't really change that for me very much.
Well, some might say that this is a good thing. You need an identity game like this. I think about the Auburn game last year, how they bounced back from that. Now, the good thing is that going into Alabama, that will have been Alabama's first SEC matchup where we went ahead, got ours out of the way, hopefully some of the jitters out of the way. Now, going to Tuscaloosa is not going to be an easy place to play, but at least tonight they're going to be able to look back, take the next 2 weeks to define the mistakes and improve before we take on one of the toughest teams in the country.
All right, so tell me, what did Mark Stoops have to say in the locker room here tonight?
I think I was fairly surprised at the feeling of disappointment coming off of him. He said that this was, they played to the best of their ability, but there are no such thing as moral wins, that when they wake up tomorrow, it's still going to be an embarrassment of what went down tonight. I will say, though, he still praised Georgia and the Georgia defense specifically. They asked him about how do you prepare and practice for a game like this, and he said you can't simulate the pressure that they have coming off on the defense. We'd switched some things up tonight on offense that worked, but ultimately when it came down to the clutch plays that we needed at the end, we just couldn't compete, and you can't trick a team like Georgia.
What did he say about Georgia in particular? Anything else about the Georgia performance of the Georgia players? Obviously, we know that Kirby Smart is always very complimentary of Mark Stoops. Did Stoops have much to say about Georgia tonight?
He certainly didn't have anything to say about the Georgia offense. He spoke about the Georgia defense. Honestly, most of the questions were directed towards him about certain play calls. I think there was only one question midway through, and he mostly talked about the Georgia defense and then, of course, the professionalism of the coaching staff.
So that's the story from Mark Stoops in the locker room. Let's also get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean tonight. And Kaylee, while I've got you here, let's bounce through a couple of these scores. Alabama 42-10 today over Wisconsin. I know some of that's going to be obviously explained in part by a Wisconsin quarterback injury, but I thought Alabama today probably really entered the conversation of the 2024 season by getting that win in the manner in which it did on the road today. Pretty hostile spot, long way from home. I think Alabama gave the indication that this is probably closer to the real Bama, and the kind of ugly game we saw it play against South Florida, perhaps also in keeping with what we saw tonight from Georgia. That's not maybe the best, certainly, and probably the most typical performance from those two teams. It certainly seems like September 28th, 2 Saturdays from now, is going to be an unbelievably hard-fought football game.
Well, we saw the disarray that the Alabama fan base was in last week after the performance against South Florida. I think that they needed this more than anyone to convince the fan base that, hey, we're on the right path, we're on the right track. They do get a good win today, but I don't know how you really evaluate exactly how good Wisconsin is. So 42-10, great win for Bama, but I still don't know just yet.
We were watching closely the South Carolina LSU game where, LSU seemed like it might be sort of dead rights at one point in time, come back, take the lead. South Carolina had a valiant effort at home. That comes up just a little bit short there. And obviously for Brian Kelly, his team perhaps survives, try to figure some things out here. And for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, really kind of letting a real opportunity slip away. Now, of course, gamblers will acknowledge the fact that South Carolina covered the spread, but if you're wearing garnet and black here today, that was obviously a very disappointing football game for you.
I actually saw a video of like 30 seconds before where the students were already coming on to rush the field, potentially going to take the goalpost with them, and then I feel more bad for the South Carolina fan base than anyone else because I think that they needed that win, especially with as strong of start as they had. You really saw that, I guess what they call Beamer ball in the first half. Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers barely come out of there with a win. I don't know if that win says more about LSU or South Carolina.
We also saw, I mentioned before, the idea that Alabama sort of entered the discussion today. Oregon, that had really played pretty bad, barely slipped by Idaho in week 1. Lucky to maybe beat Boise State in week 2. Well, today, in kind of an odd spot for the game, after it's been traditionally the final Saturday of the season, playing the Civil War against Oregon State, they do blow out the Beavers in extreme fashion here. And finally, Oregon sort of looks the part of a team that wants to compete for the college football playoff. We have not seen them do that through 2 weeks, but if Alabama sort of entered the fray today, maybe Dan Lanning's Ducks do that too.
It's like you told me earlier this week, just because they played 2 bad games in a row doesn't mean they're going to perform bad against Oregon State, and I should have taken your word on it, but maybe it's just because they weren't from the state of Idaho.
Maybe that's the case. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. As far as a couple of other SEC scores, Florida, as bad as could be, they lose 33-20. You certainly think after dropping this game to Texas A&M, this really is the beginning of the end for Billy Napier. I don't know when it happens, but it's obvious that it will happen.
So I saw something like right before I came on that they're calling a board meeting Monday morning.
Oh, is that right? So this is breaking news. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you.
Thank you. Listen.
I told y'all that was going to be the desperation game, and we thought that maybe Billy Napier wouldn't be the coach by the time that they played Georgia, but he might not even be the coach this time next week.
Yeah, you very well could be the case. And then you look at other situations, Arkansas gets a win against UAB. Happy to see that for Sam Pittman. Oklahoma struggled a little bit with Tulane, finally pulled away a bit there. Ole Miss, easy over Wake Forest, first road game of the season for the Rebels. How about an upset here from Atlanta, Georgia State? Congratulations to Del McGee. He gets the victory against Vanderbilt there. So a big first win of note for Del McGee as Georgia State's coach. Love to see that. And maybe the most embarrassing result from the SEC here today, Mississippi State loses at home to Toledo 41-17. An awful result there for the Bulldogs. On the flip side of that, an SEC team getting the best of the MAC in a huge way. Tennessee shuts out Kent State, the Golden Flashes, 71-0. This was 37-0 at the end of the first quarter. That's a record for most points in a quarter. It was 65-0 at the end of the half, and then ultimately 71-0 the final there for a Tennessee team, albeit against weaker competition here, certainly, that is really on the move here right now. And that is cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, we're getting ready for our Dog Nation cruise. Kaylee Mansell will be there on Utopia of the Seas coming up in April. We want you to be there, too. We've heard from some folks here today, even. It was like, BA, I'm going to be on that Dog Nation cruise. Every time that somebody comes up to me, that's the first thing they say, which I'm always really happy about because I love folks enjoying Utopia of the Seas with all of us. We certainly enjoy that. So please make sure you check out our good friend Jessica Slater. She's a great travel agent. She's booked all of this up, and she will get you everything you need for that. You can get that from her. Email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. There's a number right there on your screen. If you're watching on video, you can see that and connect with her there, too. Of course, we can't wait for that, but we would also invite you to enjoy the best of Royal Caribbean anytime, not just our Dog Nation cruise, but Icon of the Seas, the brand new ship sailing out of Miami, Utopia of the Seas, the brand new ship sailing out of Port Canaveral. So many other great things there as well. That is all with Royal Caribbean. So a couple of final thoughts. We'll get ready to wrap things up here today. Georgia does get the win, 13-12. Clearly still a work in progress on offense. And, you know, once again, not to turn this into the sort of the see I told you so thing, because this is ultimately not about me, but we said a little bit of a suspicion that this offense is still trying to figure some things out. After what we saw tonight, that's even more true maybe now than it was. That is sort of as we expected it to be. We also thought this was the kind of game, in keeping with previous tradition from Georgia, that might be a spot where it was just closer than it was supposed to be. Once again, that was the case. But for Georgia fans who care about this and are worried that maybe Georgia drops out of the number one ranking, I don't think that happens. I believe that Georgia is still the number one team in the country, although they'll certainly probably lose some votes in the direction of the Texas Longhorns. That is probably true. I believe that Georgia will still be a slight point spread favorite in Tuscaloosa in a couple of weeks, if that matters to you. The point is that while this was the kind of game in which I think perception is slightly altered for Georgia, I don't think you'll see kind of people outside the bubble of Dog Nation running completely away from UGA. I just don't think this will stick in the minds and the memories of the kind of national media types, the odds makers, the people who are a little bit more objective. I just don't think they'll have quite as long a memory of this as we all do. Everyone was certainly curious for a while when it seemed like Georgia might get upset, but Georgia avoids that tonight and finds a way to keep a very long winning streak alive. So keep in mind the good. We'll evaluate the bad. We got 2 weeks to figure out how Georgia travels to Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama. And obviously, we'll look forward to being back with you again for this show at that time. But over the course of the next couple of weeks, we have got a lot to talk about here on Dog Nation Daily. So for Kaylee Mansell and Jeff Sentell and Davin Bellamy, Jay Black behind the scenes and all the folks working with him, thank you for being a part of our Dog Nation postgame show. We will see you here for this program in a couple of weeks live from Tuscaloosa. Back Monday for Dog Nation Daily. And stay close to the Dog Nation YouTube page. All the press conferences, including Kirby Smart, get all of that right now. DawgNation.com for everything that comes from the game by way of analysis. And, of course, all the other great content on the Dog Nation YouTube page, too. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.